China really did drop a 4,000-ton machine into the Gobi Desert. Not a figure of speech, not a concept render. An actual machine, the largest crane on wheels ever built, drove 2,000 kilometers across China and went to work in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. But here's the question nobody's asking. What exactly was it sent there to build? Because once you understand the answer, you'll realize this isn't just a story about a giant machine. It's a story about who controls the world's energy future. And China just made a very loud statement. If engineering stories like this are what brought you here, subscribe and hit like. You're going to want to see what comes next. Let me start with something that sounds simple, but isn't. Wind turbines are getting too big for the cranes that install them. Think about that for a second. In 1985, a wind turbine had a power output of around 50 kilowatts and stood about 15 meters tall, smaller than a 5-story building. A standard construction crane could handle it without breaking a sweat. Today, China is deploying wind turbines in the 8 to 10 megawatt range. Their total height from the base of the tower to the tip of a blade, up to 200 meters. That is a 60-story skyscraper rotating in the wind. And someone has to lift the components to get them there. The nacelle alone, the housing that sits at the very top of the tower and contains the generator, can weigh over 200 tons. That is the equivalent of stacking 30 full-grown African elephants and then lifting the whole pile to the height of a 60-story building. With precision, in a desert, in the dark. Before 2024, no crane on wheels could do that job. Not in China, not anywhere on Earth. The machines that existed could not reach the heights the new turbines required. So China built a new machine. But here's what makes this story even more interesting. The machine that built the machine was itself a record breaker. And the record before that was a record breaker too. In June of 2022, Zoomlion, one of China's 2 major crane manufacturers, delivered a 2,400-ton all-terrain crane called the ZAT-24000H. At the time, it was the most powerful wheeled crane on Earth. It could lift a wind turbine nacelle to 160 meters in 30 minutes. The industry said, "Remarkable." 18 months later, a rival Chinese company called XCMG unveiled the XCA3000. 3,000 tons of lifting capacity. It could hoist 190 tons at 160 meters and handle 10 megawatt turbines. The industry said, "Incredible." 9 months after that, Zoomlion came back with 4,000 tons. In less than 27 months, the world record for wheeled crane lifting capacity had increased by 67%. Not because engineers had extra time on their hands, because the turbines China is building demanded it. That is not a company getting lucky. That is an industry being pulled forward by a government mandate so large, it made the physics catch up. So who exactly is Zoomlion, and how do you go from air conditioners to the world's largest crane? Zoomlion Heavy Industry Science and Technology was founded in Changsha in Hunan Province in 1992. Today, the company has over 35,000 employees, operates in more than 170 countries, generates over $6 billion in annual revenue, and for the first time in 2024, earned more than half of that revenue internationally. Changsha is also home to SANY and is near XCMG, making Hunan Province arguably the most important region in the world for heavy construction machinery. 3 of the world's major crane makers within a few hundred kilometers of each other, competing with the intensity of Formula One teams. When Zoomlion unveiled the ZAT-40000H on September 28, 2024, the company's Hong Kong-listed stock jumped 38.31% in a single day. The market understood immediately what this machine meant. Not just a product launch, a capability that no one else had. Now let's talk about what makes the ZAT-40000H so different from anything that existed before it. The lifting capacity is 4,000 tons. That is the headline number. But the real engineering achievement is in what that capacity makes possible. The crane can independently install a 7-megawatt wind turbine at a height of 190 meters, and a 10-megawatt turbine at 160 meters. Before this machine, those lifts required multiple cranes working in coordinated pairs. Scheduling 2 massive cranes, managing load-sharing calculations, communicating between 2 separate crews. The ZAT-40000H does it alone. Its boom and jib combination reaches 210 meters. That is taller than a 65-story building, extended horizontally from a machine sitting on the ground. Here's the detail that absolutely blew the engineering world's mind. The entire machine, with a 4,000-ton lifting capacity and a 210-meter reach, is only 3 meters wide. 3 meters! That is the legal width limit for driving on provincial highways in China without requiring a police escort convoy. This machine drives itself to the job site on public roads. The engineers designed the impossible lift capacity around the road width, not the other way around. It can also configure itself from transport mode to fully operational lifting rig in under 8 hours. And it can navigate a 22-degree muddy slope under full load. In a desert with no roads, on terrain that would stop conventional equipment, this thing just keeps moving. Do you think building the world's most powerful wheeled crane is impressive? Let me tell you about the factory that builds it. Zoomlion's smart industrial city in Changsha covers over 6.67 square kilometers. The hoisting machinery park alone, where the ZAT-40000H is manufactured, contains the world's first intelligent factory, covering the entire production process of wheeled cranes from raw materials to finished product. It can produce 1 complete wheeled crane every 18 minutes. Inside, 56 intelligent production lines, 4 completely dark production lines, meaning the lights are literally off because no humans work them. Over 2,000 industrial robots, 150 cutting-edge technologies integrated into the manufacturing process. And here is the detail that pulls the whole story together. As of January 2025, Zoomlion's smart industrial city runs entirely on solar power. The rooftop installation across the 4 manufacturing parks covers 400,000 square meters with an 85 megawatt capacity, generating 65 million kilowatt hours per year. The factory that builds the world's largest wind turbine crane is powered entirely by clean energy. The machine that installs renewable energy is made by renewable energy. Now here's the part that most coverage completely misses, and it is genuinely jaw-dropping. Before the ZAT-40000H can lift anything, it has to get there. And it drove approximately 2,000 kilometers from Changsha to the Gobi Desert installation site, on public roads. across mountains, through cities, across the full width of northwest China. The machine that no crane had ever matched in lifting power drove itself to the job like a truck. Think about what that means in practice. A machine with a 4,000-ton lifting capacity navigating provincial highway toll booths, crossing bridges, sleeping in lay-by areas overnight. The engineering decision to make it exactly 3 meters wide, the narrowest it could be while still carrying that capacity, was made specifically for this moment. So it could go where the wind turbines are. And where the wind turbines are is in one of the most remote, most hostile environments on the planet. The Gobi Desert stretches across northern China and southern Mongolia. It is not soft sand. It is rocky, frozen desert in winter and furnace hot in summer. The wind does not stop. Which is, of course, exactly why China wants to build wind farms there. Here's something that will genuinely give you goosebumps. The Gobi Desert blows level 6 to 7 winds during the day. On the Beaufort scale, that is 39 to 54 kilometers per hour. Sustained. At the height where the turbine blades need to dock, you cannot precisely position a 103-meter blade onto a hub at the top of a 160-meter tower in those conditions. The margin of error for docking is measured in millimeters. The blade weighs over 20 tons and is longer than a football field. So Zoomlion's installation crews work at night. They wait for the wind to drop in the desert dark, and then they move. One window, one shot. The crane operators position the blade to within 2 millimeters of the docking point at altitude, in crosswinds, guided by sensors and precision hydraulics, while a team on the ground monitors every variable in real time. A conventional 2-crane system performing this lift requires both cranes to communicate load sharing in real time across a potentially noisy job site. One miscommunication, and a blade worth millions is swinging free at height. The ZAT 40000H does it alone. Single crane, single operator, millimeter precision at 160 meters, in the dark, in the Gobi Desert. In April 2026, Zoomlion published the footage. The world's largest all-terrain crane operating in the Gobi Desert, lifting wind turbine components to heights that had never been reached by a wheeled crane before. Within 2 months, the official footage had been watched over 1.25 million times from a channel with only 5,000 subscribers. The algorithm was pushing it aggressively because the footage was doing something footage doesn't usually do. It was making engineers, construction workers, and energy professionals stop and stare. Here is what the footage shows. A machine that looks like it belongs in a science fiction film operating in a landscape that looks like the surface of another planet. Turbine components that dwarf every vehicle around them being lifted slowly and precisely into position hundreds of meters in the air, in the dark, in the wind, with no drama, just execution. Operator Niu Xiaolu, chairman of one of the companies contracted for northern China wind installation, said it this way: "For the first time, we achieved zero outsourcing dependence in 160-meter level lifting. And the savings versus a 2-crane operation? Over 3 million yuan per project cycle." But why is any of this happening? Why did China build this machine? Why is the Gobi Desert full of cranes? On March 5, 2022, China's National Development and Reform Commission Director, He Lifeng, made an announcement that barely made a ripple in Western news. He said, and I am quoting directly, "China is going to build the biggest scale of solar and wind power generation capacity on the Gobi and Desert in history, at 450 gigawatts. 450 gigawatts of wind and solar in the desert by 2030. For context, at the time of that announcement, 450 gigawatts was more than twice the total installed wind and solar capacity of the entire United States. China's total grid-connected wind capacity alone crossed 600 gigawatts by the end of 2025, making it the world's largest wind power market for the 15th consecutive year. Xinjiang province, where the Gobi Desert deployment is concentrated, has technically exploitable wind resources of 780 million kilowatts. The installed capacity there reached 30 gigawatts in 2025, and it is accelerating. The ZAT-40000H was not built for one project. It was built for every project that is about to follow. Here's what comes next, and it is the part that should genuinely shock you. China is not just building wind farms in the Gobi. It is simultaneously building the transmission lines to carry that power thousands of kilometers to where people actually live. The Xinjiang Power into Chongqing project alone is an 800 kilovolt ultra-high voltage direct current transmission line carrying electricity from the desert directly to one of China's largest inland cities. Thousands of kilometers of infrastructure built while the turbines themselves are being installed. And the desert is also being turned into the factory that builds the turbines. Xinjiang's Hami city now manufactures 22 million kilowatts worth of whole turbines every year, plus 1,320 sets of blades, plus 400,000 tons of towers. The manufacturing base moved to where the installation is happening. The turbines are being built, transported, and installed in the same region. What you are watching in the Gobi Desert footage is not a construction project. It is an industrial transformation of an entire region of the planet at a speed and scale that has no precedent. The crane is not the story. The crane is the instrument. Let's zoom out one more time, because here is the number that puts everything in perspective. At the end of 2025, China added more new wind energy capacity in a single year than most countries have in their entire grids. China produces 50 to 70% of global wind turbine components. China's crane manufacturers are now racing past their own records every 18 months because the demand signal from the government is so large that the only rational response is to build bigger. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom, debates about planning permission for a single wind farm can take a decade. In the United States, the average permitting timeline for a major energy project exceeds 4 years. In Germany, wind farm approvals have been tied up in court for years over noise regulations. China drove a 4,000-ton machine 2,000 kilometers across the country and started lifting 10-megawatt turbines in the dark in a desert, while the paperwork in other countries is still being processed. That is not a criticism of regulatory systems. Regulations serve real purposes, but it is an honest description of who is building the infrastructure that will power the next century, and at what speed. Remember the question from the beginning? What exactly was the ZAT-40000H sent to the Gobi Desert to build? And why does the answer tell you who controls the world's energy future? Here is the answer. China is building 450 gigawatts of clean energy in the desert by 2030. It is building the transmission lines to carry it. It is building the factories inside the desert to manufacture the components. It is building cranes large enough to install turbines that did not exist 5 years ago. The ZAT-40000H is not impressive because it is 4,000 tons. It is impressive because it is the logical consequence of a decision made at the very top of the Chinese government, executed at every level of the supply chain simultaneously, and now physically visible in a desert you can see from space. The crane is not the story. The energy system it is building is the story. And while you are reading this, there is another one driving across China right now. If this kind of story is what you came here for, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover the technologies and the systems reshaping the world before the rest of the news catches up. And leave your answer in the comments. If China can deploy a machine this size in a desert this remote, what else are they building that we haven't heard about yet? Drop it below. We read every single one.